Ken invited me. Ken's wanted to do this trip for a while, and I was lucky enough to be invited by Ken. We decided in like I think I said yes around the 4th of July in 2019, and we left the 3rd of November, so it was very quick. And I just want to point out also that Ken is here tonight, listening and available at the end for Q&A. And Bruce Nalaboff, who is also part of the crew for one of the passages, is on Zoom tonight too. So I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. And all right, so we left from Mystic, Connecticut in November of 2019, and this is our tracking that's been on the boat. So we went through, we stopped in Bermuda, and then on the way down to the Caribbean, where we went down the island chain as far as St. Lucia, back to the Virgin Islands and Culebra. We stopped in Colombia, through the Panama Canal, and then we crossed the Pacific to French Polynesia. And this is the day that we left. So we left from Mystic, Connecticut. This is Ken's boat. It's a Lagoon 410. Ken has a marine services business, Johnson Marine Services, and he's a surveyor. He's also a delivery captain. And so like he bought this boat, it's 2005. He bought it out of charter, but he's put tons into it. So it's not a typical production lagoon. He's added longitudinal strainers to beef up the hulls. He replaced the plexi windows with polycarbonate. He replaced all the rigging and upsized it, so it's oversized for what it is. He's got airplane grade steering cables in it. There's 2 separately functioning autopilots, many, many, many other updates. So this is the boat that we've been traveling in. And we crossed the Gulf Stream and in the North Atlantic went to Bermuda, which was our first stop. So I know that there's a lot that we've done to cover in 45 minutes. And I've heard that in particular, there's kind of an interest on circumnavigating in the group. So I'm gonna blow through some things quicker than others. And if you have questions, I'll come back to them later, but I'm just gonna hit some of the highlights in the Caribbean. So after Bermuda, we went to the Virgin Islands and then Dominica, which was definitely a highlight for me. It's a very lush, mountainous, gorgeous island. We rented a car and we bought all sorts of produce from these, the people that were farming the land there. I mean, it was everything. It was like pineapple, orange, grapefruit, banana, potatoes. They gave us leaves to make teas. Just everything grows there. It's really lush and the people are amazing. We stopped also in Martinique, which is one of the French islands, and this is a rock that you come in around. And just for scale, I've got a boat there to give a sense of like what the scale is of that rock, which is pretty huge. The Saints, which is another French island south of Guadeloupe. And then, so when you're traveling in the Caribbean, you're generally on the western side of the islands and the wind comes from the east or the northeast. So you're in the lee of the islands when you're alongside an island. And then when you're in the opening between islands, it's a different sea state, different wind velocity. So this is in the lee of Guadeloupe, which is one of the largest islands in the Caribbean. And you can see it's pretty calm there. But then as soon as you get to where the end of the island and where there's an opening, it's entirely different situation. We also went to Antigua where we ran into Maiden there, which I know a lot of people from WSA toured when it was in LA. And Antigua is a place with a lot of super yachts. I know that right now, like Below Deck is there. One night, taking the dinghy back to the boat, we just kind of like zipped in between some of them and did a little tour of super yacht, the port windows that we could see in from the dinghy. We went to St. Martin, which is half Dutch, half French, and we snuck into this hotel and did a little pool lounging and poolside drinking. And this is the ocean out there. And then also Anegada, which is one of the British Virgin Islands. And I believe it's the only one that's not mountainous. It's a lot more, it's similar to the Bahamas. It's pretty flat, more Anegada. And then I was trying to capture, like the water is so green that sometimes the clouds have the green tint in them. So I was trying to capture that green tint in some of these photos. So this is just more Caribbean. This is the US Virgin Islands, St. John, and a lot of that is actually in park land, National Park. And then this is the British Virgin Islands. This is Trellis Bay. This was a welder that we went to his studio and he makes these fireballs. And then on the full moon, there's a party once a month. And they put all sorts of wood in these fireballs along the beach and in the water. And there's music, there's trapeze artists, there's guys on stilts. It's pretty amazing. You can see the full moon up there as well. So this is in Trellis Bay, British Virgin Islands. And then we hauled out there. We hauled out the boat. We've hauled out 3 times so far to date. This is in Virgin Gorda. This was the first haul out. We painted, we did a bottom paint job while we were there. We also stayed on the boat. And while we were painting it on the hard, did 2 coats. Obviously as a catamaran, there's 2 hulls. We did it pretty quickly. We got back in pretty quickly. Then after picking up our crew in the Virgin Islands, we stopped briefly in Culebra. And this is an island, it's Puerto Rico. It's an island off of the bigger island of Puerto Rico, part of Puerto Rico. And then we headed to Colombia. We weren't gonna play this video, which I know is a little bit choppy, but just to get a sense of some of the passages, I would just attach the camera to the boat and just let the camera move with the boat. So we stopped, we weren't planning to go to Colombia, but we did because of weather patterns and sea state. And that is a passage that Bruce, who is here tonight, and he's from Fairwind, one of the boat chiefs there, he was on that passage with us. When we got to Colombia, we had to come around this point. This isn't the exact point, but all of a sudden the wind is blowing like 40 knots. Luckily, Ken was prepared because he'd been there before and he knew, but you kind of just get slammed coming around this point. And here we are coming into Santa Marta, Colombia. This is Bruce here and Eric, who was also crew on that part of the trip, who's a friend of Ken's in Connecticut. We brought this sailing dinghy along with us that also will row, and we used this when we were at anchor. We sailed around the anchorages in that boat. So Santa Marta was just amazing. I fell totally in love with Colombia. There's all sorts of street culture. There's performers everywhere, music everywhere, art everywhere. It's lush. We went into the mountains. This is where like the coffee and the cocoa grow. And it's just, the people are phenomenal. The food is like unbelievable. It's so good. But it's always blowing there. This is the marina. There were 2 places that we were actually in a marina. Otherwise, we were at anchor or occasionally on a mooring ball. So this is the marina. This is an island out in the water that was all lit up, and you can just see it's like constantly blowing. There was like no weather window to go. It was just like always the grid files, that all the weather was always just like red. That was it. It was always blowing, and we had to go. We had to get on. We were going to Panama, so we did. We left Colombia for Panama in the best conditions that we could, which weren't great. This was probably the most challenging part of the trip, from Colombia to Panama. We had winds that gusted to 45, and we had waves that were like 12 to 20 feet. We had breaking seas, and we actually breaking into the cockpit also. So one time I tried to go like hang up the GoPro to get some footage of it, but I got slammed by a wave. And I mean, I saw it coming and just couldn't even move fast enough. But the boat ended up, at one point it was moving at 21 knots with no mainsail up and just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of jib. So we were pretty concerned. The potential for pitch pulling was certainly there. And since then, we've kind of talked quite a bit about this part of the trip and how to proceed further, especially like when we get to crossing the Indian Ocean and around Africa, South Africa, where there are big seas. So this is the AIS coming into Panama. You can see there is like unbelievable amounts of traffic, and it's definitely a bit overwhelming. This is our boat, our waypoint here, and looks like we got like 19 knots behind us. Then when you come into Panama on the Atlantic side, there's like one place to land, and that's the Shelter Bay Marina, and that's what this is. There is no other option on the Atlantic side. So everybody that's there is either about to go through the canal, which is the most common, or they've just gone through the canal. And we happened to be there at Carnival, and we had dancers come to the marina. It was kind of a surprise. They just showed up and danced. It was pretty cool. So you kind of have to wait there for a while you have to get your boat measured and you have to get like lines and go through all these processes and have an agent who had told us to be prepared to wait for up to 3 weeks, but we only had to wait about 8 days, I think. So we got through there pretty quick. There's nothing there. It's not, we would go, there's jungle there. There's not a town or anything. There's the marina and there's jungle and there's this abandoned fort, but there's all sorts of monkeys and holler monkeys. So we'd go for walks in the morning. It's kind of sweltering during the day. So you get up and go walking in the jungle in the morning. Then there was a shuttle from the Shelter Bay Marina that took us to Cologne daily. You could sign up to go on the shuttle and you could provision. This is a roadside stand that they would stop at for produce. And they would go into Cologne for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. And Cologne was like, definitely, it's tough living in Cologne. It was pretty, I found it pretty photogenic, but it's a tough place to live. This is all Cologne. So this was like the nearest town. They had these amazing buses. They were all school buses. They were painted, and this was like the transportation that was available. If you didn't have your own car, the paint jobs were just amazing, and they were all over the roads. This is the Chagres River. This is what's dammed to make Lake Gatun between the Atlantic and the Pacific sides of the Panama Canal. And this is going into the Panama Canal. So you can see the traffic lined up here. We're waiting for our advisor here, and you can see that there's tugboats with some of the cargo ships. Most of them had 2 at this point, you can see. So when you go through the canal, they assign you an advisor. It's a 2-day event, and there appears to be like 2 sailboats that go through the canal a day. It's almost all commercial traffic, and they put the sailboats in together, and they assign you an advisor on the boat. Here's the advisor, our first day. The advisor, we had a different advisor the second day, and that's part of the fee that you pay to go through. They bring you these lines, they give you 4 of these and these big fenders. And then you have to have 4 line handlers, and we had 4 people on the boat total. So you need 4 line handlers and a helms person. So we needed an extra line handler. So we hired this guy, and the line handler does stay on the boat overnight and is on the boat for both days. He's showing us some of his fancy rope work here. Kind of impressive. There's our line handler. So when you're going through from the Atlantic to the Pacific, you go up first, and you go through 3 locks to get to Gatun Lake. And so this is the first lock. So we're going to pull in. We're going to be behind this boat. We're going to be going through at the same time as this cargo ship, and these doors are going to close behind us, and the water's going to rise. We were tied to this tugboat here. Here's the doors that actually close behind you for the water to rise. And here's Bruce throwing a line to the tug that we were tied to as we went through. You can see the tug is tied up here. So there's some cleats up there. Threw in an extra picture of Bruce. And behind us, there was this tiki boat that the second day we went through with them. We were tied together with them. But the first day, so there was that blue cargo ship, us in the tugboat, and these guys. And this is, we all went through together. And these are the doors closing behind us. So the cars along the side have lines attached to the cargo ships. And then you can see here now the water's risen. This is the tug that we're tied to. And this is the car that's going to move along to help this boat as it exits. So there were 3 of those the first day, and then you wait in Gatun Lake overnight. And you can't just go like anchor wherever you want or anything. You have to go, they tell you like here, you have to go to this particular mooring buoy thing and tie up with this red boat that we were going to go through with the next day. And the next day, a different advisor came, and they delivered the advisor to your boat. And so then we went through Gatun Lake the next day, and it's amazing. There's just so much traffic. The boats are huge. I'm pretty sure this is Panamax, but I'm not 100% positive. These obviously all fit on semi trucks, and we had to wait. We were just waiting here on a mooring also because the boat that was coming with us, the red tiki boat, they were having engine problems and they weren't able to keep up, and we were going to be going through with them. So we were kind of just waiting here and watching the traffic go by just from the boat. And you can see, I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Then a tanker starts coming through too. And they both kind of pass each other. And as they get towards the stern, you can see that they each have Canal Authority boats behind them. And then behind them, there comes this like tourism boat to go through the canal. So I was fascinated by all the commerce that was going through there and the scale of the boats in there. So the next day, all of our locks were bringing us down. We had to go down to get to the Pacific side. Here we are tied to that boat. This is a cargo carrier here, and I have some pictures of it coming up that help put it in perspective for scale. So we're starting with the water raised. The water's going to be lowered and the doors are going to open. Because we're not tied to a tug, we do need to be tied here to, and we had line handlers on shore. They don't use the big cars for sailboats. So our line handlers, when the water is high, obviously the line's attached to our cleats, there's more line out, and as the water lowers, we're pulling line in, or when it was the opposite when the water was rising on the other side. So these doors are going to open, and we've lowered. This is that cargo ship, or the car carrier ship. It's just amazingly huge. And this is for scale. Here's some people, and here's the cars that were attached to it and the lines that are attached to the car there. We went through most of the locks the second day next to that boat. And then here's where they offload it. And our advisor actually happened to have spent like a dozen years or something on those boats, traveling the world on them. So he told us lots of stories. So after we go through the canal the second day, we went around a peninsula and we came to this mooring field, or anchorage. We dropped our anchor right pretty much at dark. We finished anchoring right when it got dark. This is Panama City behind us here. We only stayed here one night. We found a better place, but we did spend some time in Panama City also. So here's just a couple pictures from Panama City, which was gorgeous. This is the Palace Police, which I think is like far more GQ than our US police. So this is where we moved to. We moved to moorings here, and they made us tied up to 2 moorings. You can see there's 2 right there. So we're on the boat here. This is the bridge. This is where everything is happening. This is either the entrance or the exit to the canal. We couldn't have been any closer, and we ended up spending close to a month, I think, here on mooring balls here. We came and left a couple times, but we always came back here, except for that first night I showed earlier. This is the Bridge of the Americas. This is connecting the land of what's considered North America and South America. So, and like I said, everything goes through there. That's it. And so one night I was actually asleep. It was early morning and I heard clang, 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 clang. And I'm like, what is that sound? And I look out the porthole at the same time, 5 short blasts. And here's this yacht carrier like about to run into us. Here we are on the boat. This is that Bridge of the Americas. We quickly start up the engines. We're like ready to get out of there if we need to, but the Canal Authority did show up quickly. You can see that this yacht carrier's got 1 anchor down and it's dropping the second anchor. And that eventually, I think there were like a half a dozen Canal Authority tugs there to turn it around. I looked on the AIS because we had started the engines and it actually said not under command. And it looked like it was a couple hundred feet from us at the time. So from our anchorage or mooring there, we watched all sorts of traffic go by, and we had like competitions where we would try to guess the length of the boat going through the cargo ship or tanker or whatever, and look on AIS and see who was closer. So the pilots got on the boats further out, but the line handlers got on while the boats were moving. So this Canal Authority boat and this cargo ship are both moving. And there's a guy climbing a ladder here. I know it might not be easy to see. There's a guy climbing a ladder to get on this ramp where there's another guy coming up, and there's already some guys at the top. So the boats would be moving and they would offload their line handlers there, climbing up that ladder to get onto the boats. It was fascinating. This is leaving. This is Panama City in the distance, leaving. And we went to Las Perlas Islands, which are remote and wild and undeveloped and just amazingly beautiful. We spent some time there, and Just took a lot of photos. We brought the dinghy to a place where there was a village one day. There were a lot of uninhabited islands and there weren't very many people when there was a village. This guy gave us a tour of the village there. I think there were something like 20 people in that village and one of them was the cop. And this is his gym. He's like working out on this equipment here. This was their generator that they turned on every night at like 10 o'clock for a couple hours. So the village got their power through this generator. And this is Painkiller at Anchor out there. This is in Las Perlas. So we had, in Las Perlas, we rigged up this Gennaker that we have that on a bowsprit that will fold in when we're not using it. We hadn't really used it. We had tested it out and we had used it a little bit in the Caribbean, not much, but we rigged it up again here because we hadn't used it coming to Panama. Oh, and we also launched the sailing dinghy. We launched the sailing dinghy as often as we could. We were actually able to row it here as well. It's a Dire Dink. It's about, I think it's 9 or 10 feet. So we did go back to Panama and now here we are crossing the Pacific. So we, this was like the intertropical convergence zone, or what's commonly called the doldrums. It wasn't really all that bad, but it's pretty quiet here when you're close to the equator. And sailing along with the Gennaker there. It's an amazing sail to sail from Panama across the Pacific. You've got current with you, the wind is behind you, and it's blissful. You're just blissed out the whole time. We were wing and wing most of the time, or a lot of the time we were wing and wing. And we did not go to the Galapagos, but they were also closed. We weren't planning to go there, but we couldn't have because COVID had hit and the Galapagos were closed even before we left Panama. So we sailed north of the Galapagos and there we had these boobies ride with us at night. I think for like 4 or 5 nights, we had boobies ride all night on the boat. And then we'd have a couple during the day. Like this one's just riding on the furling line for the Gennaker. They'd just be there all night. They did leave like big poop on the deck and whatnot, but it was pretty cool. So we took a northern route. The typical route is south of the Galapagos. And if you read like world cruising guides and whatnot, that's usually there's more wind there. But we took a northern route, which is not the norm, and it really worked out well for us. We crossed the equator here, 00000. I didn't quite get all zeros, but you can see at about 97.5 degrees west. And you can see there's not much wind. We're not really moving all that fast at this time. So this is a very typical, this is it. This is like crossing the Pacific. This is the look. This is what you see. It took us 27 days. There's these trade wind clouds. You've got, I don't know, I think somewhere, it would range like maybe as low as 8 or 9 knots sometimes, up to like in the mid 20s sometimes, but it's just beautiful. It's peaceful. It's the current brings you along. One of the things that was like kind of interesting for me is that in the northern hemisphere, obviously in southern and northern hemisphere both, the sun rises in the east, sets in the west, same with the moon. But in the northern hemisphere, it goes through the south. So the sun, we're used to the sun, the moon moving clockwise, but it actually goes through the north in the southern hemisphere. So there were nights, it was so disorienting to me, especially at night. Somehow the moon made it more disorienting that I always thought the moon was supposed to be on the other side of the boat, but it actually moves through the sky counterclockwise. So this is more just crossing the Pacific. So on the boat, I was the weather router. I got the weather, was the weather router and the navigator. And I was a little bit, we went more north than anybody. Like everybody that you meet in Panama is doing the same trip. And then you start maybe like communicating with them when you're going across on their inReach or something. In the end, we stayed more north than anybody and it paid off for us really well. Even after we crossed the equator, we stayed north for a very, very, very long time. So then when the wind got lighter and we were going down to the Marquesas, had a much better angle on the wind. And Ken was the fisherman. Here he is catching a fish. I am not a good fisher person at all. And also like a lot of times if there's just 2 people on the boat, it would take him a while to bring a fish in, and you have to be careful it doesn't go into the prop or under the rudders or everything. So I would often drive the boat and just do exactly what he told me to do, because I don't really know what you're supposed to do for a fish. But he had to keep the fish at a certain angle to the boat, and it would take a while to bring a fish like that in. And sometimes, and we didn't have time obviously to take sails down or anything. So sometimes we'd even actually have to like start both engines and put it in reverse while we're sailing to slow the boat down to be able to bring fish in. This is our first sighting of land after 27 days in the Marquesas. By now, French Polynesia had closed and their maritime borders were closed, all their borders were closed. But since we had already left, we were able to apply to their Department of Maritime Affairs and their equivalent of the Coast Guard, their joint rescue. And you were supposed to go straight to Tahiti, but you could ask for permission to stop in the Marquesas for the purpose of refueling or reprovisioning only. So we did ask for that permission, and we were granted 4 days. We had to stop in Nuka Hiva. This is Nuka Hiva. And we had to be in one particular anchorage in Nuka Hiva. So we knew we weren't going to be able to get off the boat. One person was going to be allowed to go to the store to provision. And we couldn't even clean the bottom or anything, which by now, after 27 days, had quite a bit of growth because we couldn't go in the water. So we stopped here and threw a fender off, put hove to, and did a little bit of swimming before we actually came in. And then we came in. This is the harbor where we came in. So we were basically the last boat to leave Panama because officially Panama was closed when we left, but French Polynesia was still open. So nobody left Panama after us. And if you were coming from Mexico, it's a faster sail. It's not as much distance. So all these boats were in the same situation. This is who crossed the Pacific last year. This was the only place you could stop. This was it. Some of them, because they had been there longer than us, had permission to stay longer. By the time we got there, we had 4 days. They gave us 4 days, but then there was no wind. So an agent arranged for the people that were supposed to leave when there was no wind to be able to stay a couple extra days till the wind filled in. They made us go straight to Tahiti. We weren't allowed to stop anywhere, which was another 800 miles. So it was about 4,200 miles on the rum line from Panama to here, to Nuka Hiva. And then we were granted 4 days, stayed a couple extra days, and then we were forced to go straight to Tahiti. We weren't allowed to stop anywhere. So here we are sailing to Tahiti, and we had to go through the Tuamotus. We weren't allowed to stop there, but this is one of the island groups. It's very hard to see this, but these are atolls that are very low lying, and they're called the Dangerous Archipelago. And that's because they're really easy to run into, not see. Some people actually take a route a little more north to avoid going through them. We did go through a couple of them, but they weren't really tight passages. We routed to where we had more space going through them. But it's a pretty risky area. You can see them here too. And we're not like that far from them. It's not like they look small because we're far away from them. That's like what they look like. There's these atolls out in the middle of the ocean. So here we are sailing to Tahiti and seeing Moorea for the first time when we were coming in. Tahiti's over here, that's Moorea. We all had to go to the same anchorage in Tahiti. We had to go there. So this is our view of Moorea from that anchorage. And it's sunset, and here it is during the daytime. So this was the anchorage that we were in confinement in here, and same with everybody else. And they had even more strict confinement in some ways, like in French Polynesia, we had to get permission. I mean, in the Marquesas and Nuka Hiva, we had to get permission from the police to go to the grocery store. And then there were like 3 police checkpoints between the dock and the grocery store that was like a quarter of a mile away. And here it was like a little bit easier. You still had to get this form filled out to show the police, but you could go to the store. They didn't let us both go into the store at the same time, but anyway, you still had to stay on your boat. You weren't supposed to go in the water or anything. And this anchorage became known as the Hotel California because, again, everybody was in the same situation. So we arrived initially in the Marquesas. I think it was April 10th, I believe. And the confinement eventually was gradually lifted in increments, but it was lifted enough that we could leave this anchorage in the end of May. I think it was like May 29th or 30th, something like that. And so, oh, here's some rays under the boat. So almost everybody went, they went west. They went to the societies, which we did want to do, but we really wanted to see the Tuamotus too. So we went back. We actually traveled back east. So we went from Tahiti and we went to like Rangiroa, Ahe, Apataki, Fakarava, and then we did go back to Tahiti. We did do the societies, and then again we went back to the Tuamotus. So generally, going to the Tuamotus is on the traditional like milk run or coconut run. You go to the Tuamotus, you're like more or less there in like May or whatever. We ended up being there, and then you're in the societies by June. But we ended up in the Tuamotus maybe June, July, August, September, and October, minus a few weeks when we did the society. So we were there at like not the time that you usually go, which matters quite a bit for weather. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But this is approaching our first Tuamotu that we were going into. This is the second largest atoll in the world. It's 100 miles around Rangiroa, and the largest one is in the Indian Ocean. So we did a day trip. This is like a typical scene in the Tuamotus. Motus are these little islands that form a ring to make the atoll. And Rangiroa has 415 or 450, I think, motus that make Rangiroa. And there's a lagoon inside. So this was from a day trip that we did, just a fire on the beach there. I mean, the water's amazing. It's beautiful. It looks like those, screen backgrounds on Zoom. And so then you have to move. So when you're in the lagoon, you have to move for the weather. So if the wind is blowing from one direction, you get behind a motu that'll keep you in the lee. And then the wind's going to blow from another direction. So you move somewhere else. And so you're always paying attention to the weather and what's happening. It's not really blowing here, but we did move here because we knew it was going to blow and we were going to be more protected there. The underwater life is just stunning. This is just like regular scuba diving, just like fish. And then in the mornings, we would throw like little pieces of baguette, which is the only affordable thing to eat in French Polynesia. We would throw little pieces of baguette into the water. And this is just throwing the GoPro underneath the boat after throwing little crumbs of bread in the water. I mean, it's just amazing. This is just crossing the lagoon after we had moved to be protected from wind. Moving the wind had changed. We were now moving to a different place. Came into lots of dolphins swimming with us. So this is the pass. This is the big thing about the Tuamotu, is getting into and out of these lagoons. So this is an example. This is a pass. So the wisdom is, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to figure out when is slack tide and go when it's slack tide. But figuring that out is nearly impossible, and some of them don't even have slack tide. So there'll be like 3 different tide. Some of the motus have no pass. There's no way to get into them at all, no way. Some of them have a pass, but a sailboat can't get into them. Like a little fishing boat can get in, but not a sailboat. Some of them have 1 pass. Larger ones have 2 passes. So all the water from the lagoon is going out of these passes or in. And so you're supposed to go when it's high tide, but like there might be a tide table for a lagoon that doesn't even have a pass. And then there's a different tide table for another lagoon that's like not even close to that tide table, but it's close geographically. And like this atoll, like might not even have a tide table, but this one has 2 passes. So there's no way you can like really find out the information. So we spent a bunch of time studying them. And then they'll say like, if it's facing this direction, go when it's coming or going. If the wind has been blowing more than 20 knots, don't go when it's facing that direction or whatever. There's all these truisms or whatever you're supposed to figure out. So we were actually just really fascinated by the passes and spent a lot of time watching them just because they're mesmerizing and learning and figuring out when to go in and out. And you also want to go when like the sun is behind you, not in your eyes. And there's very strong current. Here's some video of this one. I know it's a little choppy, but also I noticed when I was previewing this before starting, I saw dolphins jumping over in this corner that I hadn't noticed were part of their one, just jumped there. The dolphins love these. So you can see the water's going out. So sometimes there's another dolphin. There's like very often there's times, at this pass in particular, we studied this, we were there almost every day. And I think we saw water actually coming in, you know, like I can remember 2 terms. It might have been more than that, but like the water was just always going out. It didn't matter. The water was just like always going out. So you have to figure out when to move about. So this is going out through that pass, which was a pretty good time. We had figured that one out. Somebody came, friends of ours in a different boat came in their dinghy and took these photos. And there's Ken with the shrouds at the helm, and they took these photos of us going through. And there, you can see we've got one reef in. So then when you leave though, you're going to another atoll generally. So you also got to plan when to get to that atoll. What direction is that pass facing? Has it been blowing more than 20 that direction or the other direction? And you don't want to go there in the middle of the night. So it's actually one of the more interesting parts about the Tuamotus, besides that they're beautiful. And then because we were there at the time when generally people aren't there, we had these maramus, they're winter winds. They're called the maramus, and they come along with these highs, and they don't necessarily, the wind doesn't necessarily follow the isobars, and it's confusing because they travel with highs rather than lows, and it just blows and blows and blows. So it'll blow like in the 30s for sometimes like 5, 6 days in a row, and it'll rain kind of off and on. It doesn't rain the entire time. So then you're watching the weather and you got to be sure like, okay, there's a maramu coming. You got to be in the right place. You got to be in an atoll where you have some protection, and not all the atolls have places where you can have protection from certain directions of wind. And they, so you plan out quite a bit in advance that you're going to go to this atoll because the wind is moving that direction. Has a place where you can be. There's going to be a maramu. It's going to blow like nuts. You're probably not even going to put the dinghy in. Many of those days you're going to have like backgammon tournaments and eat a bunch of food and watch movies for days. And then when it's over, you can go to the next atoll. So we ended up traveling with different boats at different times, like knowing like, okay, there's a maramu coming, let's go to this atoll. And so they would come also. Some days like no one would get off their boat because it was just brutal sometimes, but gorgeous as well. And really interesting to study the weather there. So this is just like a cell phone picture looking out at the ocean side, like standing on the lagoon looking out. And another view looking out at the open ocean. So, and then there's like amazingly beautiful times in between these maramus. And this is time we're just like having a bonfire on the water. And then the other thing that happens in the Tuamotus is there's these coral heads everywhere. So when you're anchoring, you have to like not be caught on these coral heads, which can be really challenging. So again, the sun, the light makes a big difference. And you do this thing where you float your chain, and I put a picture of that in there. So you like anchor, but then you put these buoys on from the pearl farms that you get, and you float the chain up like this. Sometimes we even had 3 on, mostly we had 2, but sometimes you had 3 on so that you weren't caught on the coral heads. But even though we did that, we did get caught on coral heads, and we actually blew out the motor on the windlass. We had to replace that, trying to get off one. You just like, it's very hard. The wind blows you around them. You don't always know that they're there, or you drop the anchor in what is sand, but by the time you go back, it's not in sand anymore. So here's some beautiful water in Apataki and Ken in the sailing dinghy. And then we did the societies. So we did the Tahiti Moorea Rendezvous, which is a regatta that happens yearly, but was canceled and then rescheduled like 3 different times because of COVID. And this is from their website. They took this picture of us coming in. It's usually a bigger event than it was. There was only, I think they said 40 people this year because very many boats never made it across this year. And they introduced us to all sorts of Polynesian culture. It was a 3-day event, and they had fire dances at night and dances during the day, and they fed us this amazing food. They showed us all sorts of like sports things, and we raced in the va'a'as, and it was an introduction to Polynesian culture. It was just beautiful. And this is where we were anchored. This is just like all the stuff was happening there. You can see the roof of the building. That was our anchorage while we were there for the Tahiti Moorea Regatta. This is Moorea. So the Society Islands are like where people go to vacation. The Tuamotus are really remote. They're very wild. people definitely travel to the societies. These are places that you would fly in and then go and be able to have like a place to stay and some fine food and travel by inter-island hopping on planes. So we did the societies. We actually kind of did them relatively quickly and spent more time in the Tuamotus. This is Wahine. All of these have rings around them, more Wahine, and they do have reefs, but the passes are very easy. They're not a major consideration in terms of weather or anything. When you can easily move about in the societies and go in and out of the passes. I mean, you can't be stupid, you have to be paying attention, but this is Raiatea, and this is where people do charter boats. And my understanding is this is where WSA people chartered. And back here, it's hard to see, but there's some masts. That's the Dream Yachts charter place in Raiatea. And this is more Raiatea. Raiatea shares a lagoon with Taha'a, and this is Taha'a, and some local transportation there. Some motus in Taha'a. So this is Taha'a looking at Bora Bora. So this is Bora Bora here. Bora Bora is to the west of Taha'a, and this is Bora Bora. So we did sail to Bora Bora, and we went all the way around, all the way that's allowed, that's possible to go around. Some of it's a little bit challenging to get to, but we did. And there's the classic Bora Bora postcard picture. Beautiful. I mean, everything about it is really beautiful, but there's nothing else to say. Then we went back to Apataki, and that's where the boat is right now. So this is the pass into Apataki. And there's 3 pictures in a row, and they're all taken like bam, 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 right after each other coming through the pass. So you can see there's also in this pass, there's pearl farming going on. That's how people make their living, by farming pearls. Tahitian pearls are pretty famous. And this is the same. I just moved on the boat to a different position as we were going through the pass to take this photo, and then another. So this is the lagoon side. We're coming from the ocean, open ocean, into the lagoon and through the pass there. So you can see it's pretty, there's a lot to these passes. Makes them pretty fascinating to watch, to think about, to figure out when to move through them, how to move through them, where to be. And this is where the boat is right now. This is the yard in Apataki. This is the family that has the yard. They live on that motu. There's not a village or anything on the motu, just the family that lives there. And this is a very typical, this is a house in the Tuamotus. They pretty much all different colors, but this is the norm. So this is hauling the boat in the Tuamotus. So you can see all these coral heads. This is in Apataki. That's me on the bow, Ken's driving. And this is one of the guys, Tony, flagging us in, and the other guy in the water there. They're guiding us in, telling us how to get in there. And you can see there's somebody in the water there. They're gonna jump on the boat and they're gonna tie the boat up to these coral heads. That's what's keeping the boat in place, because the wind is beam. So we had to wait. Actually, we were supposed to be hauled. I don't know, we waited many days to be hauled. I forget the exact number, but the wind was way too strong to haul. And so finally it had calmed down enough. In fact, we were gonna have to leave and leave them to haul it the way that it was going. But luckily at the last day, we were able to haul it while we were there. So this is a little bit of video. So what happens is they line it up in the water. Everybody's in the water, and they bring this trailer down underneath it, and they line the trailer pads up, this backhoe here, in the water. Everybody's in the water, and this is all like one family that lives on this motu. So it's like the 3 generations. The father's driving the backhoe, and the son's in the water, and there's a grandmother as well. And then they take the boat out of the water by just backing up the backhoe. So here's Painkiller coming out of the water. It's a lot different than how they do it in LA. And there she is. So now we're in Apataki, and we've got to get back to the US. And this is Painkiller in the background there in Apataki, and you can see the sail behind. There's the dinghy there. So this is before we hauled her. I took this photo. And there's no airport on Apataki. There is an airport on Aratua, which is another atoll, which is probably the closest atoll. But there's no, a sailboat can't get in the pass to Aratua. So we have to get to Aratua, and this is our way there. So Alfred is going to drive us in this boat 2.5 hours in the open ocean in this boat. We're going to go through this lagoon. We're going to be out in the open Pacific, go to another atoll through their lagoon to get to the nearest possible airport. You can see there's no shelter, nothing to hang on to, nothing. So we figured out a way where we could just press our backs against each other and be fairly comfortable on the way over. And then when you get to the airport, it's not accessible by car. So here's Alfred, here's our boat. We cross 4 boats. He's 4 boats out. We cross through all these other boats with our luggage to get to the airport. Here's just a beautiful airport picture here. And then we took a prop plane that stopped at multiple atolls before going to Tahiti. So it's a really nice kind of view of the atolls from the sky. So it stopped, we were in Aratua, it went to Ahe, Manahai, and I think somewhere else that I'm not remembering. So it gives you a sense of what they look like. The sky view is pretty amazing, the aerial view. This is obviously the ocean side, and now here we're going into the lagoon. You also get a sense of these coral heads that you got to figure out that you don't want to bottom out on, you don't want to run aground, and you also don't want to get your anchor caught on them. So it really makes sense why they're called the dangerous atolls. And this next one, this is, when I play this, I'm going to turn the sound on because we're coming into Tahiti. This is Tahiti here. And the flight attendant is actually speaking in Polynesian, preparing everybody for the landing. And the language is just like so beautiful. So I'm just going to play a couple of and then this is us also coming in. It's the same, it's coming in, it's the rest of that flight that you just saw, but we're going by the anchorage where we did confinement. So we're going by what became known as the Hotel California. And you'll see the boats over there. So there's where we did our confinement. So we're flying in over that and captured that. And then the plane lands, and then obviously we catch an international flight to the US. So I'm going to answer questions. If you're interested, we've got a website. And also if you're interested more about the confinement, there's a podcast that Temper Footnotes did. It's on the podcast in Apple products, at least. I'm sure it is in Google products. And it's Temper Footnotes is the podcast and Hotel California is the episode. So that's a lot of focus on the confinement. I'm going to stop sharing and available for questions.
Thank you so much, Julie. That was fabulous. So what we're going to do now. I can't
hear anyone. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Julie?
I don't know what to do. I can't hear you, but I can see you talking.
We can hear you, Wendy.
Okay, as long as everybody else can hear me.
Your sound and on your computer.
Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to read the questions that are in the
I don't know why I can't hear you.
I don't know either.
Okay, try again.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to read the questions in the chat. As we said before, if Ken and Bruce want to unmute and participate in answering, that would be fine. So I think our first question was from Coco, who said that Panama used to be quite dangerous. So how is it now?
So I think that that's still a reputation in Cologne, but not necessarily in Panama City. And I think that you have to have certain kind of street smart and wisdom traveling Cologne, and you do maybe not go certain places, but there's also a whole zone because cruise ships come there. So we found it relatively safe. I mean, we only took the shuttle from the marina to Cologne to provision, and we're smart about what we did. We did rent a car there once also, but otherwise Panama City was fine.
Okay, from Sadie. What made you decide to take the northern route instead of the southern route to cross the Pacific?
Two things. There was this, there was supposedly this like shadow intertropical convergence zone. I was receiving weekly, I subscribed to like a blog from a weather guy in New Zealand that did the entire South Pacific. And he was talking about this near intertropical convergence zone on the southern side of the equator. And because it was the equinox when we were in that area and how that was affecting the weather patterns. It was that, and then as we kept going, we did still stay very north, even after we went north of the Galapagos. And that was in part wanting to have a really good angle on the wind, and also this weather blog that I'd been reading that came out weekly from the New Zealand guy about the weather in the South Pacific.
Okay, and from Susan, how does a catamaran handle in the rough seas compared to a monohull?
It's much more comfortable, that's my opinion. But Ken, do you want to answer on that?
2 keels, 2 rudders, 2 engines. Straight as an arrow.
Yeah, we didn't even come close to broaching or anything in that rough patch that I was talking about. Like, we were fine in that area. It handles, and on the boat, Ken, when we're like reefing and stuff, I'm the mast person. So Ken is in the cockpit and I'm up at the mast. And I have to say that I really appreciate the stability of that. You know, like often when you're putting the third reef in, it's blowing, you know, and you're not on your side, you know, you still have to be careful and be balanced, but not nearly what you have to do on a monohull in the rough weather.
Okay, from Melody. Were you lined up on rangefinders to help keep you straight in your approach to the small passes?
There were no rangefinders. The only rangefinders that I saw were in the societies. There were none in the Tuamotus. There were rangefinders in Wahine that I saw, but otherwise there weren't rangefinders.
From Debbie, what is next for Painkiller?
Okay, so Painkiller. We had tickets back on February 22nd to return to the boat. We are supposed to be in New Zealand now. It is closed. The entire South Pacific is closed. We're not in New Zealand, obviously. We were already going to postpone our return because we want to be able to move forward, not be stuck, as beautiful as it is, not be stuck in French Polynesia. We'd like to be moving forward. And then French Polynesia just closed again. So our flight actually has now even been canceled. So even if we weren't already going to postpone, we can't, and they can't reschedule it. They have no idea when they're going to allow flights again. So now, because we're not going to be able to go to New Zealand, we were going to do like a second season in the South Pacific. The plan would be to be able to get to Australia and then across the Indian Ocean, which you need to do by the beginning of November to get to South Africa. So probably the hope is that next winter enough things will be open that we can move. It's cyclone season right now also, so you don't want to be moving right now. So we could hopefully be able to stop, particularly in Tonga and Papua New Guinea, which we want to spend time in both of those places. We're hoping they open. We're hoping we get vaccines, and that next year at this time, we're back in French Polynesia, getting the boat ready for cyclone season to end, hit those places, get to Australia by September, and cross the Indian Ocean by November. That's the plan.
From Sadie, did you have any restrictions after your confinement, or were you pretty much free to travel everywhere?
We were free to travel within French Polynesia. The confinement was lifted kind of gradually. Like there were things in there, like there was no alcohol for sale. And eventually like that got lifted. There was like, eventually like we still couldn't leave the anchorage, but we could go in the water. Like at one point it appeared that we could go to Moorea, but nowhere else. So it was all gradual, but when it did get lifted, the maritime borders are still closed. They've never opened because there's too many boats there. Now everybody is stuck there. Everyone's in the same position that we're in. We luckily had a long stay visa, so we're okay, but other people have had to only be there 3 months and got sent home or, left their boat, whatever. We did have long stay visas, which was a saving grace. But, so the maritime borders remain closed, but there are no other restrictions within French Polynesia.
Okay, from Kathleen, she wants to know how your relationships were for spending so much time together. And if you want to answer, how did you handle conflict?
I wish I could see Ken's score better.
You know,
We played, we played backgammon and I got whooped.
Yeah, I am the better backgammon player. It's hard, there's definitely challenges. You spend a lot of time and like, a lot of that time we couldn't get off the boat, but we made it work. It was, I don't know, like if we can really answer exactly how we handled it. I don't know if we always handled it a certain way or anything, but we're still talking to each other. And do you want to add anything to this?
There are no options. You have to get along.
There you go.
I think it's a very good sign that you're talking to each other still. Another question is the long-term plan to come back to the US with the boat or to leave the boat somewhere else?
No, it's to circumnavigate and bring it back to Connecticut. That's where Ken lives. And he would like to bring it back home.
Okay, well, it's amazing that we finished just at 7:30.
Oh, good.
So I want to thank you, Julie, Ken, and Bruce for joining us tonight and telling us about your adventure of the lockdown and COVID when you're trying to circumnavigate. We just had a chat, said if you need some crew, you could probably recruit some from WSA. And for our members, thank you very much for showing up. This was one of our biggest attendance. And I'm going to say good evening. And it's very late for Julie. She's on the East Coast. So we do want to let her go and get some sleep. So thank you all for coming.
Well, thank you guys for having me. Like as a member of WSA, I would always go to the talks and I really appreciate being invited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Night.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Thanks, Jules. That was amazing.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Hey, Bill. I'm trying to see who's on. Hey, Jen.
On mute long enough to say thanks. Good job.
We'll see you soon.
We'll see you.
Good to see you here. I'm still looking at who's here.
Unmute. Okay.
Good to see you, Jules.
Wait, who said that? I missed that.
Stu under Peggy.
Oh, hey, Stu. Good to see you.
Yeah.
I don't see you, but good to see you.
Oh, well, good to hear me.
That's us. That's who's there.
Good to hear me. I don't think your camera's on.
Oh.
Oh, well.
Don't think, what?
I don't think the camera's on.
Oh, your camera's not on. Mine is.
Yeah, I was talking to Peggy.
I'm not sure. Oh, wait, here
Right,
we
'cause
go.
Peggy's
Here.
watching, so.
Oh. Hey,
I haven't seen you for a long time.
There's Stu. Hi.
hey, Stu.
Okay, so I'm going to end this meeting in a couple of minutes. I did want Julie to be able to say hi to the people that she knows here since she's not in Los Angeles right now. So thank you again. I hope it's not too late for you over there.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
What happened? Oh.
Just ask a question because I couldn't figure out how to put it in before. Why couldn't you go in the water for a while?
I mean, that was their restriction. That was the restriction in French Polynesia.
Do you know why?
At least one of the speculation pieces was that They couldn't go in the water, like the residents, the local people couldn't go in the water. They couldn't go for a swim. So if they're looking out at us in the harbor, swimming around on boats or whatever, it might look like we're just having this great time when they're stuck, not able to use the lagoon or the water. That was a speculation. I don't really know if that was the real.
We couldn't go in the water here for a while too, which was, so,
Yeah. Well, we got enough water eventually.
Hey,
Okay,
Jules.
I'm going to end the evening.
Okay, I just want to say a quick hi to Jules. I was looking at pictures from Wow back when you were on my crew and from the Baja Ha Ha. And look how long your hair is. Oh my gosh, I have you not cut it in like 4 years.
I don't know. It's just easier because I had to cut it myself. So it's easier to just not cut it.
Well, you look fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Good to see you.
I agree with Barbara. The hair looks great.
Oh,
So,
thanks, Jen.
yeah.
Great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Miss you guys. I miss LA. I'll be back.
Of course.
We'll look forward to seeing you.
I
Hi,
look forward to doing
everybody.
that.
Congratulations.
Bye.
It was Nice
Thank
talk.
you.
Very
Thank you.
interesting. Brought memories of Tahiti when we were there.
I know you guys went. Yeah.
Yeah.
Say goodbye.
All right.
All right. Good night.
How long?
Thank
Hey,
you.
one
Thank
question.
you.
Shirley, what?
One question.
Okay.
One question.
Okay.
Okay, one
Was-
question, Hans.
How long, when were you in Shelter Bay Marina? And was it full service, the little store, the hotel, and et cetera?
There was no hotel full service. There was it's a marina, just there's a pool. There's a pool. We were there, I think we only ended up being there 8 days. We were prepared to be there much longer, but we were only there, we got through pretty quickly.
Was the restaurant open?
There
is
was
the
a bar,
restaurant
there
open?
was a bar restaurant. Yes, that was open, yes.
Okay,
All right, this was really it.
I do.
all right.
Hello.
Good night.
Bye.